Welcome back. This is Your Story Corner, the podcast, designed and created specifically to help you relax and unwind, to help you settle for a good night's sleep with a good bedtime story, to remind you that you are not alone. And no matter whatever is going on around you in your life right now, remember, it will pass. It's going to pass. And you are going to be okay. You're going to be okay. If you are listening to us for the first time, so glad you have found our little corner of the universe. This podcast is created and recorded in a way to help you slow down and relax, encouraging you to just pause. And if it's time to get your sleep, you can put us to one side, close your eyes, breathe deeply, focus on the sound of my voice and the warmth of the crackling fireplace. And when I tell the story, I want you to paint the pictures in your mind and bring them to life. And maybe while you're doing that, you can do some breathing techniques. In a future episode, I'll be passing over some techniques and some advice, all about breathing and how to reduce anxiety if you're feeling a little tense and stressed. So maybe now you can just breathe. Check in with yourself today. Where are you holding any tension right now? Are your shoulders paying your earlobes a little visit? Just shrug them down. Just let it go. Thank you for everyone returning to the podcast. We are thrilled that we have had over 10,000 downloads in the first couple of months since we've been doing this little podcast. It's extremely gratifying and very humbling. The aim of this little hobby of mine is to try and just put something good back into the world that I truly hope helps you whichever way you need it. So thank you for downloading and streaming all the episodes wherever you are listening to us right now. Maybe you are listening to us on our new stream on our YouTube channel, which you can now listen to all our episodes. But wherever you are listening, thank you. So this week, it's time to return to the 100-Acre Wood and our next chapter of Winnie the Pooh. But I thought we would return to some fascinating facts that surround this incredible little bear that's brought so much joy to so many people. Now you may recall from a previous episode, I told you the story of the real-life bear that inspired the famous little bear that we know today. It was all revealed in a book called Finding Winnie by the author Lindsay Matrick, where it revealed that back in 1914, a Canadian veterinarian named Lieutenant Harry Colborne brought a bear for $20 while serving in World War I. You may remember he named his new pet Winnie, after his native Winnie Peg, and the cub ended up serving as a mascot for his regiment while he was stationed in England. And you may remember that he had to leave, but he left Winnie behind where it was safer at London Zoo. And unlike the famous little bear of our stories, this Winnie was a girl. The plush toy was named Winnie the Pooh, a little toy that A.A. Milne's son owned. And also he had a whole host of other toys, inspired characters for the stories. However, there were some toys he didn't have, and were totally made up for the stories, and they were Owl, Rabbit, and Gopher. You may remember Gopher from the Disney cartoon version with his whistling, unique accent. The Pooh part of Winnie's name, would you believe it, actually came from a swan. But the exact origin of this is hard to pinpoint. Some people and some sources say that the Milne family met a swan named Pooh on vacation. And Milne also refers to a swan named Pooh in his poem called The Mirror. Christopher Robin, who feeds the swan in the mornings, has given him the name of Pooh. A.A. Milne wrote, "This is a very fine name for a swan, because if you call him and he doesn't come, which is a thing swans are good at, then you can pretend that you were just saying Pooh to show him how little you wanted him." Also, in the book I referenced earlier, the author wrote that Pooh was the sound Christopher Robin would make to blow away feathers a friend's pet swan, yes, another swan, would shed. But regardless, eventually, Winnie was paired with the Pooh, and the rest is history. The famous illustrations by E.H. Shepard and the sketches were based off another bear called Growler, which was his son's bear, which explains why Winnie the Pooh isn't the same colour of the brown little cub bear that inspired the author. It's something that's always interested me, that how did he end up the colour he was? Now we know. And the original plush toys can be seen at the New York Public Library. And I know this for real, because I've been there myself. When I first went to New York, and I heard of this story, it was a while back now, and I was like, surely it can't be true. So I tracked down the New York Public Library, and there he was in the children's section. So the next time you're in New York City, see if you can find all those toys. You won't, however, find Roo, because unfortunately, Christopher Robin lost Roo in his 30s, or as I like to think of it, Roo went swimming. That will mean more to you when we arrive at the very famous chapter from our TikTok lives. And finally, the adventures of Winnie the Pooh have been translated into 50 different languages, and the Latin translation is the only Latin book to ever earn a spot on the New York Times bestseller list. It was released in 1916. It stayed on the charts for 20 weeks and sold 125,000 copies. As we all know, people just love that bear, no matter the language. And talking of that bear, it's time to find him once more, and it's time for your bedtime story. So I hope you're sitting comfortably, or if you're curled up in bed right now, get comfy, cozy, and relax. This is your Story Corner and your bedtime story. Winnie the Pooh by A. Mill. Chapter 4, in which Eeyore loses a tail and Pooh finds one. The old grey donkey Eeyore stood by himself in a thistly corner of the forest, his front feet well apart, his head on one side, and thought about things. Sometimes he thought sadly to himself, why? And sometimes he thought, wherefore? And sometimes he thought, inasmuch as which? And sometimes he didn't quite know what he was thinking about. So, when Winnie the Pooh came stumping along, Eeyore was very glad to be able to stop thinking for a little while, in order to say, "How do you do?" in a gloomy manner to him. "Oh, and how are you?" said Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore shook his head from side to side. "Not very how," he said. "I don't seem to have felt at all for a long time." "Oh dear," said Boo. "I'm sorry about that. Let's have a look at you." So Eeyore stood there, gazing sadly at the ground, and Winnie the Pooh walked all around him once. "Why, what's happened to your tail?" he said in surprise. "What has happened to it?" said Eeyore. "It isn't there." "Are you sure?" "Well, either a tail is there or it isn't there. You can't make a mistake about it. And yours isn't there." "Then what is?" "Nothing." "Let's have a look," said Eeyore, and he turned slowly round to the place where his tail had been a little while ago, and then finding that he couldn't catch it up, he turned around the other way, until he came back to where he was at first, and then he put his head down and looked between his front legs, and at last he said, with a long, sad sigh, "I believe you're right." "Oh, of course I'm right," said Boo. "That accounts for a good deal," said Eeyore gloomily. "It explains everything. No wonder." "Well, you must have left it somewhere," said Winnie the Pooh. "Somebody must have taken it," said Eeyore. "How like them," he added, after a long silence. Boo felt that he ought to say something helpful about it, but didn't quite know what. So he decided to do something helpful instead. "Eeyore," he said solemnly, I, Winnie the Pooh, will find your tail for you." "Thank you, Pooh," answered Eeyore. "You're a real friend," said he. "Not like some," he said. So Winnie the Pooh went off to find Eeyore's tail. It was a fine spring morning in the forest as he started out. Little soft clouds played happily in a blue sky, skipping from time to time in front of the sun as if they had come to put it out, and then sliding away suddenly so that the next might have his turn. And then through them and between them the sun shone bravely. And the cock, which had worn its furs all year round, seemed old and dowdy now beside the new green lace where the beeches had put on so prettily. Through copse and spinney marched Bear, down open slopes of gorse and heather, over rocky beds of streams, up steep banks of sandstone into the heather again, and so, at last, tired and hungry, to the 100-acre wood. For it was in the 100-acre wood that Owl lived. "And if anyone knows anything about anything," said Bear to himself, "it's Owl, who knows something about something," he said. "Oh, my name is not Winnie the Pooh," he said. "It is," he added. "So there you are." Owl lived at the Chestnuts, an old-world residence of great charm, which was grander than anybody else's, or seemed so to the Bear, because it had both a knocker and a bell pull. Underneath the knocker there was a notice which said, "Please ring if Runza is required." Underneath the bell pull there was a notice which said, "Please Chinook if Runza is not required." These notices had been written by Christopher Robin, who was the only one in the forest who could spell. For Owl, wise though he was in many ways, able to read and write and spell his own name, W-O-L, yet somehow went all to pieces over delicate words like measles and buttered toast. Winnie the Pooh read the two notices very carefully, first from left to right, and afterwards, in case he had missed some of it, from right to left. Then, to make quite sure, he knocked and pulled the knocker, and he pulled and knocked the bell rope, and he called out in a loud voice, "Owl, I require an answer. It's Bear speaking." And the door opened, and Owl looked out. "Hello, Pooh," he said. "How's things?" "Oh, terrible and sad," said Pooh, "because Eeyore, who is a friend of mine, has lost his tail, and he's moping about. So, could you very kindly tell me how to find it for him?" "Oh, well," said Owl, "customary procedure in such cases this is as follows. "What does customary bro seed cake mean?" said Pooh. "For I am a bear of very little brain, and long words bother me." "Well, it means the thing to do." "As long as it means that, I don't mind," said Boo humbly. "Well, you see, the first thing to do is as follows. First issue a reward. Then—" "Just a moment," said Boo, holding up his paw. "What do we do to this? What you were saying? You just sneezed as you were going to tell me." "Well, I didn't sneeze." "Oh, yes you did, Owl." "Well, no, excuse me, Pooh, I didn't. You can't sneeze without knowing it." "Well, you can't know it without something having been sneezed." "No, you see, what I said was, first issue a reward." "Oh, you're doing it again," said Boo sadly. "A reward," said Owl very loudly. "We write a notice to say that we will give a large something to anybody who finds the old tail." "Oh, I see, said Boo, nodding his head. "Talking about something large somethings," he went on dreamily. "I generally have a small something about now, about this time in the morning." And he looked wistfully at the cupboard in the corner of Owl's parlour. "Just a mouthful of condensed milk, or what not, or perhaps a lick of honey." "Well, then," said Owl, "well, we write out this notice and we put it up all over the forest." "A lick of honey," murmured Bear to himself. "Or is not, as the case may be." He gave a deep sigh, and tried very hard to listen to what Owl was saying. But Owl went on, and on, using longer and longer words, until at last he came back to where he started, and he explained that the person to write out this notice was Christopher Robin. "Oh, see, here was he who wrote the one to my front door for me. You see them, Pooh Bear?" For some time now, Pooh Bear had been saying yes and no in turn, with his eyes shut, to all that Owl was saying. And having said yes, yes last time, he said no, not at all, now, without really knowing what Owl was talking about. "You see them?" said Owl, a little surprised. "Oh, come and have a look at them now." So they went outside, and Pooh Bear looked at the knocker and the notice below it, and he looked at the bell rope and the notice below it, and the more he looked at the bell rope, the more he felt that he had seen something like it somewhere else, some time before. "It's a handsome bell rope, isn't it?" said Owl. Pooh Bear nodded. "Yes, it reminds me of something," he said, "but I can't think what. Where did you get it?" "Well, you see, I was just coming across in the forest, and it was hanging over a bush. Well, I thought at first somebody lived there, so I rang it. And nothing happened, and then I rang it again very loudly, and it just came off into my hand. And as nobody seemed to want it, well, I took it home, and—" "Oh," said Boo solemnly, "you made a mistake. Somebody did want it." "Huh? Who?" "Eeyore. My dear friend Eeyore. He was fond of it." "Fond of it?" "Attached to it," said Winnie the Pooh sadly. So With these words, he unhooked it and carried it back to Eeyore. And when Christopher Robin had nailed it on his right place again, Eeyore frisked about the forest, waving his tail so happily that Winnie the Pooh came over all funny and had to hurry home for a little snack of something to sustain him. And wiping his mouth half an hour afterwards, he hummed to himself proudly. "Who found the tail? I," said Pooh, "at 1:45. Only it was 11:15, really. But I found the tail." And so ends Chapter 4 of Winnie the Pooh by A. Mill. Good old Winnie the Pooh. Well, I hope you enjoyed that chapter and it helped you relax and settle down for a good night's sleep. But remember, if you're not quite there yet, you can go back and listen to previous episodes where you can find the earlier chapters of Winnie the Pooh, some fairy tales, some Peter Pan, and so much more. And you can join us for our live bedtime stories on TikTok. We are usually live every other night from 10 p.m. UK time. Just find us on TikTok. Just search Your Story Corner. And if you haven't been there already, we have a brand new website. Just go to www.yourstorycorner.com. There you can listen to all the episodes directly and find all the links to the places you can listen to us and our social media links. You can follow us on Instagram, on X, Threads, and of course, YouTube, where you can now listen to all the episodes there as well. But we've come to the end of another episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you again for helping us achieve over 10,000 downloads in just a couple of months, 1,000 more streams on all the platforms you can find it. It's always just been a little ambition of mine. This is a hobby I do in my spare time because I believe everybody should have the experience of being read a bedtime story. To either remind you of your childhood or replace that moment in your childhood where maybe you weren't read a bedtime story, but to help you relax and unwind and remind you that you are not alone. So until next time, sleep well and good night.